Good morning. Hello and welcome to another edition of Shree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. Hashtag NYT Read Along. Our guest today is Matt Goldman, New York Times bestselling author and Emmy Award winning TV writer. His credits include Seinfeld, you may have heard of that show, Ellen, and The New Adventures of Old Christine. Our host, of course, is Shree Srinivasan. He's been hosting this show for 5 years and counting. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the executive producer of the New York Times Read Along, and we are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. For those watching this beginning part, you're probably watching on the replay, so thank you very much for joining us and watching it later. We are live on Shree's channels. We're also live on Matt's channels on his Facebook page and Twitter account. So thank you, Matt, and for everyone joining us there. Thank you for watching today's show. Without further ado, we're going to bring in Shree Srinivasan with the Upper West Side cam. Shree, how are you doing this morning?
Good morning. It's a windy day here in New York. We're on the Upper West Side, as you said. We're looking at Midtown Manhattan, some new buildings on the skyline if you haven't noticed them before. And here's the Hudson River, and there's New Jersey. And you're seeing a quiet New York City. We are now in different phase than we were months ago, but people are being careful. I'm happy to report masks are still the norm so far.
That's great, Shree. We have several people joining us. Jonathan Borstein, of course, from Union Square, right on time at 8:30 in the morning. Sujana Chandrasekhar, acknowledging Jonathan's victory. And of course, Sujana is one of the co-hosts of She's on Call, our medical show at 11 a.m. We'll talk more about that later. Julia Weeks is joining us from Brooklyn, one of our producers. Deborah Kerr from Asheville, North Carolina. Sunny Slaughter joining us from the DC area. Sunny, thank you so much for all of your support. It was great catching up with you last night as well. Diane Stefani is joining us from Margate, New Jersey. She's joining us for a little while, but as everyone knows, you can always watch the replay later on any of these channels, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. You can always watch it in the same place where you're at. Ron Thomas is joining us from Dubai. Ron, thank you as always, one of our most loyal watchers. He'll watch wherever he is, whenever he can. And of course, he's one of our sponsors as well. So thank you, Ron, for your support from Strategy Focus Group. And so we want to acknowledge the production team that puts this together, Shree. We wouldn't be able to do this without a great team, of course. Shree as the host and myself as the executive producer and occasional guest host. But one of the things that we pride ourselves on is the engagement we have with our audience. Paula Kiger manages things on Facebook for us. Steve Taylor is on LinkedIn. Julia Weeks helps out whenever she's needed, but is also focusing on analytics. And Carla Baranakis has done a great job of securing wonderful guests like today's show, Matt Goldman, but is also helping in various platforms. So, for example, since we're streaming to Matt's page, she'll be able to interact with people there just to make sure they have links, context, and a friendly face so someone knows, people know what's going on. So thank you so much to Paula, Steve, Julia, and Carla. You can follow them at Big Green Pen, at Steve DeReeve, at Julia L. Weeks, or at Kabara. So thank you again for your support in making this a great show. And of course, Ron Thomas recognizing them as the A-team, which we certainly agree with. Other folks that have checked in, our friend Stephen Kaplan from Ramsey, New Jersey. He's still, we talked to Stephen Shree when I joined him in StreamYard for a quick conversation. We were eating pizza, So I had the camera focused on the pizza and actually signed in instead of Neil Parekh, Valentino's Pizza. Forget about it as my name. Hopefully you got a screenshot of that. Sue Ann is joining us from Memphis, and Frederick is joining us from Goa. Again, an international show as always. Our early risers, Doug Levy from San Francisco. Doug, we're so glad you join us fairly regularly. We get
5:30 a.m. Let's make that clear. He was even a guest for us at 5:30 a.m. And there are other people in California, including someone who has the paper in her driveway, but she watches the show to know what to read later in the day. So we're so grateful to our international and local, national, regional audience. Thank you so much, everybody, for jumping in. If you're wondering what this is about, if this is your first time here, I'm Sri Srinivasan, that's Neil Parekh, and we've been doing this for 5 years. Our 5-year anniversary is coming up in October, and we're going to do some epic ideas around that, epic episodes of the New York Times Read Along. I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism, and I'm a co-founder of Digimentors, our company that does social, digital, and virtual events consulting. And our policy, our motto, don't cancel your physical event. Don't even plan your virtual event without talking to us. So please email me. I'm sri@sri.net. We'd love to talk to you about producing a event, a conference. We've done events for 50 people and events for 100,000 people and everything in between. So no event is too small or too big to talk to us about. And we'd love to talk to you. And we also make virtual white label events like this. If you want your own talk show, talk to us about that as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sri. Really appreciate it. And we will, I guess Doug has an update. He's been working since 5 a.m. His time. So he's almost as crazy as us, Sri. I don't know.
Yes.
Before we take a look at what's in the paper, we would like to acknowledge our sponsors. We get some great support from sponsors. And let's see if we can start with Muckrack, Sri.
I'm so grateful to our Muckrack Academy friends because they have paid for us to create this free course, Fundamentals of Social Media for Journalists, PR pros, and everyone. It's a free certification course now available, mrac.co/social, mrac.co/social. 4,000 people have taken this course, and so can you. Please sign up right now. I learned a lot doing this, working with our friends, Linda Bernstein, Stefan Kaplan, Mike Schneider, to put this together, and you will learn a lot too, I promise.
Absolutely. We'd also like to recognize Magic Bus USA. Magic Bus imagines a world where children break out of poverty and lead fulfilling, rewarding lives, contributing to their community and to the world around them. As you can see, 7 out of 10 adolescents do not have a higher secondary qualification. 6 out of 10 youth do not have the soft skills necessary for employment. And 3 out of 10 girls are married before they reach the age of 18. Magic Bus, these are, of course, are stats from India. So thank you, Magic Bus, for your support of the New York Times Read Along, particularly Pradnya Haldapur, a friend of the show and a guest on our Mother's Day edition from May. We'd also like to recognize Strategy Focus Group. In addition to Muckrack and Magic Bus USA, Strategy Focus Group is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. They do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. Muckrack helps you discover news as it breaks, easily generate reports, and explore the work of journalists, podcasters, bloggers, and more. Oops, I jumped into Muckrack, my apologies. But again, we want to thank Muckrack, Magic Bus USA, and Strategy Focus Group for your support. If you're interested in learning more about our sponsors, you can check out their websites. We have links at the bottom of the screen. You can go to readalong.link/muckrack, readalong.link/magicbususa, or readalong.link/strategy focus group. So thank you again for your support. Sri, we'll turn it over to you to talk about what's in the news today.
Thank you very much, Neil, and big thanks to all our sponsors. And if you'd like to be a sponsor, please let us know. And don't forget, I have a daily show that goes with this, a daily show called Sri's Daily Global COVID-19 Show. And we've been on the air for 144 straight days. We've talked to folks in various parts of the world. We've had more than 1 million viewers on that on those episodes. So please join us on that. Our next episode is 9 p.m. Eastern tonight, and we are live every single day. Please contact me if you have questions about that show. All right, here is what the New York Times is looks like today, arrayed on my kitchen table. And we have a lot of things to talk about, and we'll meet Matt Goldman in just a minute. Please share this with your friends, tag them. If you're a Seinfeld fan, you want to join us. If you are a friend of great writing, you want to join us. If you like to talk about the news, you want to join us. So please tag your friends and have them join us so they can watch us live or later. All right, the front page, which we'll discuss with Matt in just a minute, has on the cover pictures, kind of scenes from different parts of America: Florida, Georgia, Texas. We'll talk about this. The Sunday Review cover is actually by a student of mine, Basharat Peer, has written, "Taking Amrit Home. My friend, my brother was not in this world anymore," and about what happened in India with two folks who were trying to get home. We'll talk about that. The business cover this Sunday is 12 people in a 3-bedroom house. First, the virus made its way through the Bay Area household. Now the rent is due. And this is, of course, a big problem for so many people. The Arts and Leisure cover, the reconciliation must be televised. So this is a good topic on which to have a TV expert with us. And Matt will be joining us. We'll talk about this story. The cover of Metropolitan is about the rise of the pod students. As public school seeks solutions, well-to-do children can weather the pandemic for $25,000 a year. Okay, I've got to learn more about that. Welcome to Surf City, New York City. Rockaway Beach has a Land's End bacchanalian feel, but it's also homey. Okay, we'll learn more about that. And in fact, this article by Diane Cardwell, Diane's going to be a guest on our show in a few weeks, so watch for that. Cover of the magazine, The Refinery Next Door. Black Americans are 75% more likely than others to live near facilities that produce hazardous waste. Can a grassroots environmental justice movement make a difference? Cover of the book review, since we're with an author today, is A People on Fire by Anne Fadiman's review of Eat the Buddha, Life and Death in a Tibetan Town by Barbara Demwick. Sunday Styles cover, Rejecting Greek Life. We'll have to ask Matt what he knows about fraternities. And the cover of At Home, the special section that was launched during the virus, We're Soaking It All In, is the cover here. And that's about it for the paper. So let's bring on our new friend, Matt Goldman. Matt is the best-selling author and Emmy Award-winning TV writer whose credits include Seinfeld, Ellen, and The New Adventures of Old Christine. So hello, Matt.
Hey, how are you? Nice to see you.
Great to see you, Matt. Thank you so much for being here. First question to all my guests. How are you? Where are you? And how are you doing through this pandemic?
I am doing well. I'm in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And me and my family have been quite fortunate during the pandemic. Everybody's healthy. Everybody's working. We feel lucky.
And I love that map behind you. Tell us about it, please.
That map I bought at the Pasadena Swap Meet, which is around the Rose Bowl. I think it's the first Sunday of every month. And I had a big wall to fill when I was living in Los Angeles. And so I saw that, and it's a classroom map from, I think, the early 80s. The Soviet Union is still on it. And I chose it as my background today because I really wanted to look like a newscaster in 1971.
And is that one of those physical maps where you can, and like relief? Does it have a little bit of relief on it, or just looks like it has?
I wish I could show you. It's relief-like. That's what
Okay.
it says at the top. So it's shaded to look like a relief map, but it's actually two-dimensional. And it is a classroom map that can be pulled down and raised up.
Well, Paula says that map is so cool. And
Yeah, I like the colors in it. That's why I have it. If I ever write a spy thriller set in the 70s or something, it'll be perfect for research.
Thank you. Sissy says, hi from Pittsburgh. Sri, I miss you at our wonderful Columbia alumni weekends. Yes, we hope we'll start those again. Matt mentioned the Rose Bowl, and I believe that the parade has already been canceled. They're not even waiting. Isn't that right, Matt? Did you hear that?
I didn't hear that because I don't live there anymore. I'm not quite as in tune with it, but California seems to, I mean, they were quite proactive in fighting the virus, and then they eased up, and then now I think they're getting proactive again. So
Therese is watching from Yonkers. Patty's asking about LinkedIn. So we're having a couple of issues with our LinkedIn feed, but just keep checking. But we're live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Please connect with me on Twitter @Sri, and please share this so your friends and family can join us from around the world. There's so many opportunities for you to connect with us and to listen to Matt and what he's working on. Matt, I'm hoping that we'll have a lot of fun things and funny things to talk about.
Yeah.
But in terms of, you're in a suburb of Minneapolis, please talk first about what's been like in the days since the George Floyd killing to live there, and if you had a chance to drive out and see what's happening.
Well, yeah, my kids live right in where most of the riots took place, so it's not far. I've ridden my bike into there several times. I lived in Los Angeles during the Rodney King, unrest, and it felt similar to that. It's things feel like they've settled down here, but they haven't, in that this city's going through a transition, a much needed transition, and it's not going to be a smooth ride, but it's a necessary ride. Minneapolis, St. Paul is quite a liberal, educated place, and yet there has been a big gap in achievement, both in the schools and in the workplace for people of color, and things need to be rebalanced. And so we're going to be going through some growing pains. Hopefully, this city can be on the leading edge like it has in other areas like education and public health. But right now we're behind, and we need to catch up and step forward.
Thank you for sharing that, and so important for people to understand what's happening there. Liza Donnelly is watching from Hudson County. Liza is a New Yorker cartoonist and also draws for CBS News, and she was a guest on our show earlier a couple of years ago, and we've got to have you back, Liza. And we try to, one of the things, Matt, I say, even as we discussed terribly difficult subjects on this show and my daily show, I say we have to laugh, because otherwise we'd just be crying all day. What is your thought? What are your thoughts on where humor has a place in the middle of a pandemic?
Humor always has a place. I remember after 9/11, they said irony is dead, and humor was dead, and that lasted about 5 minutes. It's just a natural reaction for human beings to find humor, and one of my pet peeves in dramatic television shows or in some of the darker books written out there is if there's not humor, it doesn't feel human. And if you look at TV shows like The Wire or The Sopranos or Breaking Bad that covered very dark subjects, they also had some of the funniest moments on television, and many times more funny moments than the comedies, because it's just a natural thing to find humor, even if it's gallows humor, in a tough situation. And
Liza agrees with you and says humor unites us. And amazing, you should mention The Sopranos. One of the folks that we're working with is the great Stevie Van Zandt, little Steven, who was Silvio in The Sopranos, and of course from the E Street Band, and from my favorite of the original Netflix series, Lilyhammer. I don't know if you ever got a chance to see that show.
I haven't seen Lilyhammer, but I do want to see it. Yeah,
it's basically Silvio goes to witness protection in Norway, the same way that in Seinfeld, I've always said that Curb Your Enthusiasm is George grows up and moves to the suburbs.
Yeah,
and,
I don't know if he grows up, but he moves to the suburbs. Yeah.
So we're going to talk. We want to talk a lot about Seinfeld because I'm obsessed with it, but we also want to talk about your books, and you have a big book coming out. So let's talk about that right away.
I do have a book coming out. This is it right here. It is called Dead West, and it's the fourth.
Wait, sorry, no, you got to hold that up a little longer, and then we'll show the card also. So let's show this first. There you go.
Everything's reversed.
You got to learn to adjust that in the virtual world, right? Where to show the camera and all of that.
Is that the right place?
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, this comes out Tuesday, August 4th, and
let me read this. I know you're too modest, so let me read the ads for this, or at least some of the comments here. Lee Child says, "I want more of Neil Shapiro. Interesting twists, great peripheral characters, and enough peril to keep readers turning pages past bedtime." Says book list, irreverent, insightful private detective Neil Shapiro is sure to become a fan favorite, a writer to watch, says Harlan Coben. And Harlan was a guest on our show a few weeks ago. Harlan's the only person I know who can have a New York Times bestseller and have 3 producer credits on Netflix at the same time. He was amazing, and his recommendation goes a very long way on this show. So tell us about the book. What can we expect from it, and what are we going to learn?
Well, this is the 4th in a series. It features a private detective in Minneapolis named Neil Shapiro, and the first 3 books were set in Minnesota and quite lean on Minnesota culture. So much so that when the book went out for foreign publication, Norway and Sweden passed because they said my books were too Scandinavian. Fortunately, Sweden changed their mind, and the first book, Gone to Dust, is being published in Sweden next month. But in the 4th book, Nils is hired by a wealthy couple in St. Paul. Their grandson has inherited his millions of dollars in his trust fund, and he's moved to Los Angeles. And they want Nils to go out there and see what's going on because they think he's throwing away his millions by investing in show business. And I've spent a lot of my adult life in Los Angeles as a television writer. And I always felt like a Minnesotan who was just visiting. And so I wanted to take a Midwesterner, someone who's never been there before, and show them LA and show business and just get an outsider's perspective on both the city and the business. And it was a lot of fun to write. It's received great reviews, and I'm really looking forward to getting out there in the wild.
And we're so glad that you're spending some time with us on just on the Sunday before the Tuesday launch. I know with all the problems in the world, it's very hard to feel bad for writers who aren't getting to go on their book tours. Is there anything positive about a pandemic for your book launch?
Well, in a way, we get to connect with more people because some of the bookstores would broadcast their in-store events, but now that's all people are doing. And you shouldn't feel sorry for any writer who has to launch during a pandemic. Yeah, it would be better if we were out there face to face with readers, but in the scheme of things, this is not suffering or even an inconvenience. So I guess the positive side is, one, people are reading books during this, so that's nice. And and two, that we have the technology to connect with people. If we didn't, it would, for all sorts of reasons, be a lot rougher on everyone.
I've been waiting for a mystery writer or a sci-fi writer to ask this question to.
Yeah.
In every dystopian future scenario on TV and in books, they're the zombies and all those things that happen, right? But there's never any electricity and never any internet. And so we don't have any future books where things are bad, but the internet and electricity is still there. How do you think about, what do you think about that?
I don't know. I don't write sci-fi or futuristic stuff, but I suppose if there was some sort of electromagnetic pulse that took out the grid, that would be something to deal with. But fortunately, we haven't had that yet. So it's I've just been consulting on a television show, and I wouldn't have done that if it weren't for the pandemic, because I would have been required to be in Los Angeles. But because the writer's room was all done on Zoom, I could do it from here. So there's weird pluses and minuses with this whole thing.
Yeah. Margaret is watching from sunny Vienna. Have you been?
No, I would love to go there.
Yeah, now you have friends there as well. And Laurie says, I miss Minnesota, but love Shapiro.
Oh, that's nice. Very nice.
Charles says, ordering a copy today, Matt. Congratulations. See you tomorrow evening.
So Charles is a very talented author, and on Monday evenings, on Monday evenings, I have a Zoom chat with some other authors who I used to only get to see once a year at a writers' convention. But because of this, those of us who are spread around the country, 5 of us meet every Monday evening, and it's really a treat to get to become friends with them in a way I would not have otherwise.
You could live stream at least that once a month and raise some money or make some money in a fun way. Because
that's a good idea.
Let's talk afterwards.
Yes.
Carrie's watching early morning Vegas. She was on our Life Under COVID in Vegas episodes, and I bet that you're going to have a lot of people, your friends in LA are not up watching us now, but they're watching us later. So hello to all the latecomers from LA who are friends and fans of Matt. We do this every Sunday. We hope you will all buy Matt's book on Tuesday and then join us next Sunday for another episode of the New York Times Read Along. We have so many comments coming in. Please tell us where you're watching from. Please tell us how your Sunday is going, what you're up to. There are people watching now, Matt, where it's already almost Monday, and
that's great.
And they're learning and watching with us. Adil says, "Congrats again, Matt." And his comment has come in. Adil Fakir's comment has come in.
Adil's a friend of mine. That's very nice of him to comment.
Everyone who's watching, please share this right now. We're talking with Matt Goldman, best-selling author, television writer. He's written for Seinfeld and the New Adventures of Old Christine and other shows, and is here today to talk about his new book, Dead West, which comes out on Tuesday. So please check out his work and check out his detective, Neil Shapiro. Tell us about that name. I'm hearing it and thinking that's a combination Scandinavian name and Jewish name.
Yeah, well, it comes from a real thing in my life. My dad grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan in a small town, and his father owned a little plot of land with a couple lakes on it, and he let a Swedish immigrant named Matt Anderson stay on that property. And that man, Matt Anderson, was like a second dad to my dad. And he died the day my parents were married, and I'm named after him. So I'm named after a Swede. I don't have a drop of Swedish blood in me, despite growing up in Minnesota. And I wanted to give that to Nils. So it's not so obvious with a name like Matt. So I just tried different Swedish names like Per Shapiro or Lars Shapiro or Leif Shapiro, but Nils just felt right. And I thought, there's no way there's going to be a real Nils Shapiro in the world. So I Googled it. This was in 2015 when I wrote the first book, and I didn't find it anywhere. And I thought, of course I didn't. It's a joke name. Who would name their kid Nils Shapiro? But a couple of years ago, the real Nils Shapiro found me. He heard about the books and contacted me. And he lives in Plymouth, Massachusetts. So that was fun. So a lot of people think he's half Swedish. He's not. He just grew up in a culture, especially Minneapolis is more diverse than it used to be, thank God. But when I was growing up, the Scandinavian influence was quite strong.
Well, before we look at the New York Times, we just want to talk about your books. These are some of the, just walk us through them very quickly and give us the the highlights, please.
Okay, Gone to Dust is the debut novel for Nils, and it starts with an unusual crime scene. A woman is found murdered in her home, and her body and most of the house is covered in the dust and dirt from hundreds of vacuum cleaner bags. So there's so much hair and DNA and fiber samples in that dirt that forensically the crime can't be solved in the lab. And so that's why the Edina Police Department, Edina is a real place where I happen to live. By the way, here's a tip. Don't live in Edina, then move out of it and write a novel that kind of makes fun of the police department and then move back. So I drive very carefully in Edina. But anyway, they haven't had a murder in over 20 years, which is true, and they need help. So they hire a consultant, a private detective named Nils Shapiro, and that's how I bring my character into the first story. Broken Ice is the second book. One of the biggest things in this state is the high school hockey tournament. It's a big hockey state, and so it takes place in St. Paul every year, and two girls from a tiny town of Warroad, Minnesota, which is a real town, go missing during the tournament, and the parents of one of the girls hires Nils to help find them. And The Shallows takes place when a lawyer is found dead in his suburban lake home, and he's tied to a dock by a fishing stringer. And there's a Michelle Bachmann-like character. It's a lot of fun. And then Dead West, I've told you about. These books really focus more on the characters. They're not super dark or violent. They're not cozy mysteries by any stretch. They are more noir, but it's really about the characters. And Dead West starts as a typical PI novel, and it really moves into a place of character for Nils. He has relationships in his life that now mean a lot to him and have changed his life, and he really questions whether he can keep working in this field and putting his life on the line. So they're really more about character than anything else. And I just signed a new book contract with Forge to do some standalone books. So I'm going to set Nils aside for a little bit and hopefully be coming back to him. I know there will be a Nils Shapiro short story in Ellery Queen magazine in the very near future. So
Lisa says, happy for you and all your success.
That's very nice. Thank you very much.
And the question that I have for you before we go to the Times is to talk about detectives themselves. So many of them in history, in fiction, are troubled people, starting with the greatest of them all in Sherlock Holmes. Talk about that, please. And how troubled is Nils?
Well, Nils's troubles are not, they're not typical PI things. He's not a heavy drinker. He has 2 drinks and he gets tired. He is trying to be a modern human being, especially a modern male. And it really shows in his personal relationships throughout the series. He is wounded in love. He has a very complicated relationship with his ex-wife, but some series you see those dynamics repeated over and over and over with a private detective. They go on a case, they don't have love, they find it. by the end of the book, it's over and they move on to the next one. Nils, that doesn't happen with him. He's growing through his personal relationships. Private detectives are really, they're outsiders and counterculture figures, very much like writers. And I'm often asked why there are no American PI shows on TV anymore. And my answer was always like the ones that we loved, Rockford and shows like that, kind of came out of Vietnam and Watergate. And in that time, I think we were looking more to counterculture figures to be our heroes. And after 9/11, that shifted and everything became about the police and the military, and shows like CSI and JAG and those kind of shows really took off. But I have a feeling we're shifting back now. So the PI may come back into, it's always existed in the book world, but it may come back in the TV world as we look for more counterculture heroes.
David Rossman says hello, and look at this. Terry Thompson out in Vegas at 6 in the morning.
Oh, that's nice.
Has ordered your novel. So we're selling one book at a time here, Matt. One book at a time.
Thank you, Terry, and hello to David in Florida. Be safe in the next day or two, please. Yes, yeah. I hope.
Yeah. And Therese has a question. How do you approach writing characters for books versus television? Are there any different considerations? And also, are there, if you can talk about any television opportunities for Nils?
Well, the book has been optioned. It doesn't, having a lot of experience in that world, I know that doesn't mean a whole lot. It's better than nothing. So we'll see what happens with it. Writing characters is not exactly different, but you can get inside a character's head much more effectively in the book world than you can in the TV world. But the one thing that books and TV have in common is that you can be in it for the long haul and you can stay with those characters for a long time, either chapter after chapter or in series, book after book. And that's what sets TV and books apart from movies, where unless it's a series of movies like Harry Potter or Bourne or something, you're with that character only for 2 to 3 hours.
Thank you, Matt. Let's get to the New York Times. In a few minutes after we read a bit of the Times, we'll come back to talk about Seinfeld and his other adventures in writing for television. And so you will definitely not want to miss this. Please share with your friends, tag them. They can watch later. They can watch us now or later. And let's get to the New York Times discussion with Matt Goldman. Do you have memories of reading the New York Times on a regular basis? What is your relationship with the paper?
Well, I do have memories of it. Like when I was growing up, there was no internet, so you needed to get a physical copy, and we didn't have it delivered to our house, but I would get it in the school library and from newsstands. So that's my big relationship. And then once it became available online, it is one of the 3 newspapers I read every day now.
What are the other 2? The Star Tribune and?
The Star Tribune and the Washington Post.
Excellent. And by the way, the Washington Post, I just saw they've renewed their sale offer of $29 for a year of the Washington Post. Everybody should get that and subscribe to a local paper. So important. Okay, let's look at the news and what will happen here. This part, Matt, is I'll point out headlines and stuff. Jump in anytime you have a comment or a solution for any of these world crises that you can offer. please jump in. Right. Okay. Plans for German Day X show revival of far right. Police officers, reservists, and professionals had enemies lists and body bags. Very scary story. Lead story in the New York Times, Katrin Benholz's piece. I've not read that yet, but looks very scary.
Yeah, it is scary. I did read that one.
Yeah. Speaking of Germany, one of the things that we always heard about Seinfeld is that Germans reacted differently to Seinfeld and its kind of humor. And we had a question about this also.
Oh, really? I haven't heard that.
I couldn't either. They found it, they really liked it or didn't get it at all. But a lot of people around the world got it. One of our folks who just asked a question said she was surprised how popular Seinfeld was outside of New York City.
Yeah, I had a lot of personal experiences with that. I had a play running in Fayetteville, Arkansas once, and I was just there to help get it on its feet. And we needed CO2 cartridges for an effect. We were doing a tech rehearsal, and I didn't have anything to do at the moment. So I said, I'll go find some somewhere. And I ended up driving to the outskirts of Fayetteville to a Walmart, and they had the CO2 cartridges in the sporting goods department behind one of the biggest displays of guns I've ever seen in my life. And there was just this big bubba of a guy working behind the counter. And he asked what I wanted the CO2 cartridges for. And I told him it was for a play. And he asked what else I worked on. And when I had mentioned Seinfeld, he lit up like I had never seen a guy. He was just like, Seinfeld, that's my favorite show. And that's when I realized how universal the appeal of that show is, not only geographically, but to different generations. And it really is a lesson in this is not my idea, it's not my original idea, but the more specific you make something, the more universal the appeal. And I think that's just because when you make it specific, you make it true. And so that's for any writers or aspiring writers, that's just a good lesson to know.
Well, that's exactly the kind of ideas I know people will enjoy. And here I did it again. I said we won't talk about Seinfeld till we get to the paper, and we're back talking about it. But I did find a 1997 article. Germans say 9 to Seinfeld. Teutonic TV viewers prefer Hogan's Heroes Nazis to the Soup Nazi. That's a 97 article from E. So that's how much Seinfeld trivia I have in my head. And of all things, you think they wouldn't like Hogan's Heroes, because certainly it doesn't.
You would think, yeah.
Okay, let's get back to the paper. This time for real. Florida, Georgia, and Texas, what people are doing in different ways. We were on the beach at Fire Island in New York, and we had masks on when we were close to folks. Brief reprieve, then the virus charges back. Resurgence in Midwest, South, and California. So sad. I feel like everything we worked on in states like California and the Northeast have been wasted in so many ways. So sad.
Yeah.
The left is pressing Biden over ties to lobbyists and the Bidenest of those vying to be his VP. Do you have any predictions, thoughts on the elections? And since he's going to name the VP, his VP this week, apparently, do you want to make a bet, or just name your
I don't know. I think I'd be wrong. I think there are good choices. I think, one of the ironies of having a lot of experience as a politician, as Biden does, is you have a long voting record, and so people are going to find things they don't like. I like Kamala Harris quite a bit. I know she was a prosecutor, which brings problems. That's what knocked Amy Klobuchar out of the race. I think it's important he pick a woman of color. This country needs that. I think Stacey Abrams is really smart and well-spoken, as is Susan Rice. And I like Val Demings a lot. There's good candidates out there. I think there's a lot of them any of them are going to be a huge improvement in my opinion. We're far enough away from the election. It's hard to predict what will happen, but there's an article in the Times today about the suburban voters. Biden's up by 16 points, which is a big deal. That's very different than 2016. So we'll see if that holds.
Folks, you're listening to Goldman_Matthew on Twitter. He is now a pundit of politics as well. And I'm agreeing with what he's saying here. His analysis holds up for me, but who knows, right? We are, as you said.
Yeah, who knows?
We're 100 days or so away.
Yeah.
But much before then, the mail-in process going to start. And we have a president who has gone on the record to say that we should consider delaying. And for those of you who think he's joking, he pinned that tweet, and then he's been raising it every single day since. So this is not a joke. according to Donald Trump himself. And one thought I have is about when I analyze Republicans versus Democrats, the left wants every box checked on their candidates. They have to be perfect on every single thing. Otherwise, they are not interested or not as supportive as they could be. Republicans, as you know, as long as God, guns, taxes, they don't care who they nominate. As long as those boxes are checked, there is no less of a Christian person in the world than Donald Trump, but he's a hero of the Christian right. That tells you.
This is not how you hold up a Bible. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, I heard a saying once that I can't remember who said it, but it's very true, that Republicans are unapologetic and Democrats are unforgiving. And it's really a challenge for the left because there is no perfect candidate. And nor will they, if they seem perfect, will they stay perfect. So it's about the big picture. I have kids who are in their 20s, and there's a lot of griping about Biden, and my attitude is, and what I say to them is, let's get the train back on the tracks, and then we can point it in the direction we want it to go.
By the way, great line. I know you said it's not your original, but worth remembering. Republicans are unapologetic and Democrats are unforgiving. I'm going to use that. I'm going to credit you and say you got it from someone else. So there's no lack of great quotes. Now let's see if we can translate that. Here, let's look back at the paper here. The Indian family betting a fortune on a vaccine. And this is the world's largest vaccine maker is out of India, a company called the Serum Institute. And they are betting $1 billion on making sure that people can get an untested vaccine. It's not been tested yet. And so we'll see where that goes. This is Jeffrey Gettleman's front page story. Riding the subway might not pose inordinate risk. Surprising studies. And this is one of the things that we keep saying. If you're pro-science, you're open to things changing, information coming in, adjusting to it. This doesn't mean that people were wrong to be careful on the subway the first 5 months. It just means that you want to reduce the risk everywhere you can go. And that's what people don't always understand. Let's keep moving here. So much to read in the paper. And this is on this day in history. Miss Quimby wins air pilot license. In 1911, Harriet Quimby became the first American woman and second woman overall to earn a pilot's license. And this was in the New York Times. And nice to see that headline. Have you watched The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel?
The first season I saw. Yes.
So did I. Yeah, it was great. Tell me about when you see a great show like this or others, what goes through your mind? Do you wish, God, why didn't I think of that? Or why didn't I think of that character? Talk about that, please.
No, I never think that. I don't know why. I'm happy when something succeeds. One thing I learned by becoming a member of the mystery writers community was that there's this attitude that if one book does well, it brings up everybody. And the TV community doesn't feel that way, but they should feel that way, because we're not in competition with each other as much as people think. We're in competition with everything else in the world. So if a smart comedy with dramatic undertones like Miss Maisel succeeds, it's great for all writers who want to do a show that has more depth and style, and that's a period piece. It's really hard to get period pieces made. There's a resistance to them. But whenever I see a great show, I never think, why didn't I think of it? But it does inspire me to go do my great show. Yeah.
I love hearing that. David says, Matt and Sri, wishing you both good health. Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I will also point out that people who are looking at this issue of, are we in competition with each other? When I was at the Met, I was the chief digital officer at the Met for 3 amazing years of Metropolitan Museum of Art. People would ask me, is your biggest competition the Louvre or Guggenheim or MoMA? And I'd say our competition is Netflix and Candy Crush and Life in 2020, right? Like that's the competition. And we need to have great content so that people pay attention to us. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, one thing I've heard that gives me a lot of amusement is that as supportive as the mystery writers are of each other, the romance writers, bunch of backstabbers. That's what I hear.
Now you're going to hear from them for sure. Back home, migrant workers' TAC health system, the story out of Ethiopia. Growing group of patients is leaving hospital with 2 new lungs. Like these are, innovation still happens and things are, it's incredible. Oh, speaking of shows with drama and comedy, Breaking Bad, one of my favorite shows of all time. Bryan Cranston had the virus, he says. I did not see the story before. 64 years old,
wow.
5-time Emmy winner and 2-time Tony Award winner. Discussed the diagnosis in an Instagram post. Tell me about Breaking Bad.
Well, first of all, I'll say I a long time ago worked with Bryan briefly on a short-lived TV show, and he's really one of the nicest human beings on the planet. And I think it takes a really nice human being to play an unlikable character like Walter White. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is the same way. She's one of the nicest, most wonderful people in the world, and that's what allowed her to play Selena on Veep. But Breaking Bad to me is one of my absolute favorite shows of all time. And the movie business changed, and they started making just giant tentpole movies like the superhero movies or tiny independent movies. And the real, like, for mainstream work, the character work left movies and it went into TV, and Breaking Bad was on the front end of that. Shows like The Sopranos and The Wire, Mad Men, Breaking Bad, even shows like The Closer really provided an opportunity for very talented writers and actors to do long form character work. And Breaking Bad is one of the absolute best examples of that. It's about a person who was always bad and kind of had an evil streak and who was just trying to tamp that down. It's about that person letting it out and becoming who he truly is. And it was beautifully done. And
I also love Better Call Saul, which is a much slower, more nuanced show, but it's also very good. And we can't mention Bryan Cranston and talk to a Seinfeld writer like you without mentioning The Dentist and the anti-dentite line of jokes and episode arc that happened. He played a dentist named Tim Watley on the show, and he was terrific. And the first time I saw him, this was before Malcolm in the Middle, and before even, I believe, that X-Files episode, which that's where he was noticed by the creators of Breaking Bad. But he was great as Dr. Tim Watley.
Yeah, great comedic actor and dramatic actor as well.
All right, cocktails and masks don't really go together. This is a theme all over the New York Times. Please wear your mask. It's policy. Some authorities plead, no, not on your chin. So people are having to beg folks to wear their masks, right? And it's happening in Florida and it's happening in Moscow. And we really think about those connections to everything happening in the world, what Russia has to do with it. I saw a comment from Liza Donnelly. Let's pull that up. It's about Bryan Cranston, I think. I had the pleasure to meet Bryan on the CBS set and drew him during his appearance. He is so nice. So, Matt, you have...
He really is.
Yeah. You have someone who agrees with you. Here's more about Germans and Day X. And it shows you that it's hard to beat out right-wing ideology and the kind of things that Nazis and others do. Italy underscores deadly bridge collapse, revamping highway system. Iran to expand nuclear plan. Under pressure, Brazil's president moves to fight deforestation. I mean, this is one of the things that's always surprising to me. Brazil, that's blessed with the Amazon, is one of the places that's destroying, the rainforest and everything else, but looks like some progress. Bolsonaro is a mini Trump in some ways and worse than Trump in other ways.
Yeah, he very much is.
Different protests, same tools of resistance, and viral videos of traffic cones and rackets unite activists a world apart. Let's keep going. We did two episodes about Portland on successive Mondays. Army officer who clashed with Trump's vows to speak out on U.S. security. Law to cut drug sentences is no help to some inmates. And after battering Bahamas, storm aims at Florida. And here's a big story about TikTok. Are you on TikTok, sir?
I'm not, but I know that's not the way to get the youth vote.
Yeah, exactly. So the big TikTok story, as you know, is that it's been banned in India as part of an India-China rivalry. They lost 100 million users in India because of that. That happened about a month ago. And then in recent days, Pompeo and others have been going after TikTok because it's owned by a Chinese company called ByteDance. And ByteDance has been in talks with Microsoft to sell it to Microsoft, I presume for billions of dollars. Yeah. And in the middle of all this, Trump then inserts himself and says he's going to ban it and is opposed to the deal. So Microsoft was about to buy it when I saw a headline today that they have put the talks on, this is a Republican president interfering in private companies doing private commerce. This is the state of acceptance and how the world is kind of upside down.
So upside down. I was in China last summer, obviously before the virus broke, and there were almost no Westerners there. And really, the millions and millions of people I saw in Beijing and Shanghai and Nanjing and other places, almost no Americans, really none. I would see no Americans for days. And from the people I was traveling with, that has not been the case before Trump was president.
Mary Ellen Walsh says, I love that you're doing this. Awesome. And thank you so much, folks. You're watching a conversation with Matt Goldman. He's Goldman_Matt on Twitter. Please follow him. And he's a best-selling author and a writer on many shows, including Seinfeld and the New Adventures of Old Christine, and was there in the early days of Seinfeld. And he's got a couple of great stories that he's going to share with us about the early days of Seinfeld and what it was like to work on that show. Walter Greason, who's been a guest on our show, says, fascinating to see dramas explore the darkness of people struggling against adversity. Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, Bates Motel, Hannibal. The resonance with American audiences is profound and telling. Similar elements operate worldwide in the UK, EU, and Australia. Great kind of analysis there from Walter. Thank you, Walter. Matt, what are your thoughts on those? And also, can you talk a little bit about British dramas and mysteries? Because my wife and I got a subscription to BritBox, which is like Netflix of British shows. And all my wife does is when she goes on a kind of mysteries jag, watches those. And I always joke around that if I'm ever murdered and she's not a suspect, she should be, because she now knows all the right.
She knows. Yeah. Yeah, the Brits and the Scandinavians, including the Danish, really do TV crime drama well. Really, it's at a different level. Most of those kind of shows aren't being done here, and I don't know exactly why. There's the network stuff like the NCIS kinds of shows, which print money for the broadcast networks. But the really good character work, you're just not seeing it here as much in traditional crime drama, private detective or cop shows. So it's great that we have access to the British shows. They're wonderful.
Pat says, Matt Goldman, do you ever get paper cuts during a furious book signing of a new book?
I have not got them yet. but I try not to touch the edges.
Liza says, I was invited to Beijing to speak to women's groups with the China Women's Film Festival. Fascinating. And we'll do it again next year. Had to postpone their film festival,
Yeah.
of course. Here is on the Times has 2 pages dedicated to kind of the Trump style and what's happening, including piecing together a presidency, one tell-all book at a time. And there's a very important point they make here. The sheer volume of unflattering material risks dulling their collective impact. And that's what Trump is counting on. Don't do one awful thing, do 1,000 awful things. You remember when Obama was president, when Clinton was president, when George W. Bush was president, one faux pas, one mistake.
Remember the tan suit?
Yes, the tan suit. All of that would last for months or weeks of news cycles. And now each one of those things is, he does things 10, 100,000 times worse, but does 1,000 of them. And so nobody notices, or we notice, but we don't care. It just moves on from. So this is like, if you're a dictator, this is a great way of working because just overwhelm them with terrible things.
Yeah, it's nice that there's now a blueprint for future dictators.
There you go. Nuclear plant in UAE is first for Arab nation. Trump's family business saw modest gains last year. Oh, that means they're doing better than they usually were because he's not there as much. He's still there, but not as much. Mm-hmm. And income for Ivanka Trump and Kushner, 36 million or so. And he talks about how tough it has been for him or his family. I want to talk a little bit about obits. I'm obsessed with them. Do you read obits, sir?
I don't read obits. Unless it's somebody I was particularly interested in. I should. I hear they're wonderful things to read.
You don't want to be in one.
I don't want to be in one, and I know that they're not they're not for voyeurs, and there's nothing wrong with obits. I guess I have to look at it as celebrating someone's life rather than their death. But yeah.
That's true. Laurie says, heard Sarah Pertesky yesterday on Book Passage, yes. And last week, Louis Edric and Anne Patchett, Book Passage rocks.
Yeah, those are wonderful writers. I have met a couple of them. The one I haven't met is Louise Erdrich, who lives in my same town. But the other two I've met and are very nice people.
Mark has an important question. Are you a Vikings fan? I'm from Durham, North Carolina, but a longtime Tarkenton fan and therefore a lifelong Vikings fan. Frank Tarkenton. By the way, if people overseas who have no idea what this section is about, so their eyes are about to roll if they're not rolling already. So Frank Tarkenton was a famous, in the 70s, quarterback. I knew him from That's Incredible, which was a TV show that he hosted with Kathy Lee Crosby and John Davidson.
Yes, I am a lifelong Minnesota Vikings football fan. The Vikings are one of those franchises that has always got close, but never won the big game, never won the Super Bowl. And when I was a kid and I was at that age where I really cared, when I would wear the jerseys all the time and had the pennants and the football cards, it was really damaging to see them lose so much. So it's tough. I'm not hopeful they'll ever win.
But they went to the Super Bowl and had
4
some
times.
good years. Yeah.
They went to the Super Bowl 4 times and lost each of those times. And they lost 2 NFC championships that would have got them in the Super Bowl in the last seconds. So those were all tough.
But it's this is a longer conversation about sports fandom. But is it better to be a fan of a team that gets close every single year, or to be one that, like the Jets, that I am a fan of, that had a one-time, the great run in 40 years or 50 years ago now?
I would say it's better the former. It's better to be a fan of a team that gets close, because then every game's interesting.
So you have something in common with Buffalo Bills fans, and that's my last American sports reference here for my international audience. We're looking at the obits very quickly. Ben
Shri.
Poco. spoiler of 1968 Olympic race. Oh,
Sri, I'm sorry. I can't let you. I'm going to jump in here. If you're going to be talking sports, I got to bring up a comment from Liz Arenti from earlier in the show. She's a Yankees fan. I'm a Yankees gal, was born in the Bronx, so it's practically written on my birth certificate. Go Yanks. My question for Matt, do you think the Twins are ever going to be able to beat the Yanks in a meaningful game?
No.
I'm just curious.
No. It hasn't happened yet, and it would take the Yankees having a horrible rebuilding year. It's just humiliating the way the Yankees beat up like last year. We get in the playoffs, but we have to play the Yankees in the first round, and it's just I just want to hand somebody a bat and let them hit me in the head with it, because that's how that series is going to go. I don't know why. I have so much faith in our young manager, though. This is his second season or partial season. So maybe in time he can turn the tide on that.
I couldn't agree with you more. Like I said, I couldn't let the discussion of baseball go without
Mark
making
says,
sure we covered
I'm also
that.
a Brewers fan who seems to get close all the time, and they had a couple of great runs themselves, and the Brewers are a good team. They have somebody who people have forgiven in the in their slugger who was admitted user of steroids. Before we leave, there are a couple of interesting obits here. William English, who helped build the first computer mouse, is dead at 91. And Martha Nirenberg, entrepreneur who fought for families' art, is dead. She's a co-founder of Dance Designs, who tried to recover masterpieces stolen by the Nazis.
Interesting.
And then Malik B, from a former member of The Roots, has died. He was 47 years old. The Roots, folks may know as the band that is involved with Jimmy Fallon and The Tonight Show, among other great things they've done.
Yes.
It says here that they did not say where he died or specify the cause, churning out critically acclaimed albums and inching into hip hop mainstream. And those are the items about in the obit section. But I actually have breaking news that even our executive producer doesn't know. So I'm going to tell everybody that the obits editor of the New York Times, Amy Padnani, she's NYT Amy, has promised to come on the New York Times read along and join us for a read along. That was going to be a great episode, because we will pepper her with questions about what it's like to be the obits editor of the New York Times and to read the paper with her. She was a guest on my show, on my daily show just this week. We talked about the 30th anniversary of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and she oversaw that special section we talked about last week in the paper, and she was terrific. And I asked her, and she said she'd join us. So looking forward to that in the next few weeks. We've got lots of great guests coming up, and so we will have her on when there is an opening. But thank you all for watching. We're talking to Matthew Goldman. He's Goldman_Matthew on Twitter. Please find him. Please follow him. And I'm going to give him a chance to pick where he wants to go in the New York Times. We can go the Sunday. Oh, tell us about our visitor here.
This is Clara. She's one of two dogs I have. She's a standard poodle.
Aww.
She does not have a poodle haircut and never will. And right now she's wanting some attention.
Oh, please keep her with us. She looks, she's awesome and so cute.
Yeah, maybe Maisie will join us too. She's on the floor right now.
Okay, maybe she'll want attention too. Our dog is running around somewhere. Tara. Tara has her own Instagram, the dog.
Oh,
Tara.
Nice.
Okay, so you get to pick where we go next. We have Sunday Review or Arts and Leisure or Book Review. These are all things you care about and know about. So what would you like to go? Where would you like to go?
Let's go to Book Review.
All right, so let's talk about that and talk about the obsession authors have with the New York Times Book Review in particular.
Yeah, it's the Holy Grail. It's where you'd love to get some attention someday, all of us. And so I was lucky to sneak onto the New York Times bestsellers list with my first book, and that will be something I'll be proud of forever. And maybe someday I'll get in that newspaper. I hope so. And I'd like to see what other authors are doing. It's inspiring. One thing I learned fairly early in my career, because I've worked in theater and TV and books and stage, is it's really not the medium, it's the work. And so it's nice to see where the great work is coming from. And especially now, books seem to be the one place where you can get out a pure voice unencumbered. And the TV and film world is largely looking toward books for source material.
So while I'm flipping through the section here, we'll show this, but also if you could give some advice to first-time writers, people who are writing novels. Yeah. What are your 3-4 things? I know you get asked this all the time, but 3-4 things to keep in mind as I kind of flip through these sections here. We're also looking at the crime section here as well. Mm-hmm. And Isabel Wilkerson, the author most recently of Caste, craves books about the inner lives of everyday people with marginalized groups in our country, not the extremes of either celebrity or pathology, but just working folks. And Nil Shapiro sounds like a working folk.
Yeah, I don't write about serial killers. And if any are listening, please don't hold this against me. But I just don't find killing machines interesting at all. I'm much more interested in what motivates an otherwise healthy person to commit a crime. My advice for young writers is fairly simple. One, accept that writing is hard, and don't expect giant things from yourself right away. Try to write every day, even if it's just a little bit. And even if you don't know where you're going, that's okay. You don't need to know. If you do it every day, over time, where you're going will reveal itself. And be kind to yourself. That's the biggest thing. Everybody's first draft stinks. Everybody writes a lot of junk that never makes it to print. And just take it one day at a time and be good to yourself and forgiving of your missteps, because we all make them.
Thank you. Great advice. And we're looking at Scandinavian Noir in Pursuit of a Mystery by Wendy Lesser. I don't know if you know about this book.
I don't.
An inquiry into Scandinavia through its hottest fictional export. And then a look at Jane Austen, a memoir in 5 novels by Rachel Cohen. And then How You Say It, Why You Talk the Way You Do, and What It Says About You by Catherine Kinsler. Being from Minnesota, we have heard that accent most famously through that kind of Midwestern Scandinavian-inspired accent through the movie, the TV show Fargo, which is actually set in Minnesota. What's your take on that show?
The show's great. I was skeptical because the movie is very important to me, and the Coen brothers are in general. So I was resistant to like the television show, but they've done a really good job with that. I remember I was living in Los Angeles when the movie Fargo came out, and I saw it there, and I loved it. But I thought, they're pushing it with the accent. It's not that strong. And then I came back to visit here, and I went to a high school hockey tournament, because that's something we do. And I was in line for concessions, and 2 people from Fargo were ahead of me. I knew that because of the windbreakers they were wearing that said Fargo on the back. And I heard $2 for a Coke. No way. Just that sharp accent. And I thought, they didn't exaggerate it in the movie Fargo. It is that severe.
Rick says great writing advice, and Liz and Liza Donnelly says she gives the same advice to budding cartoonists. Be kind to yourself, be patient. Is it better to write a book rather than a screenplay?
I think that's
to get into television. What she means is to get into television. Yeah.
Oh, yes, definitely to get into television. I think so. It might even be better to write I guess she means a teleplay. I think it's better to write a book because you can get your vision out unencumbered. You're not confined by the realities of production or the limits of narrative. That you don't want to write a screenplay that's all voiceover. So you can get in your characters' heads better. And one of the hardest things in TV is when you pitch an idea, everybody hears it differently, and it sets up different expectations for how that show is going to be realized. And when everyone has different expectations, there is going to be some disappointment out there. And with a book, you can tell your story and get your voice and vision out more clearly and in a way that people will see it the same way.
So here's Neil showing us Call Your Mother, Kyra Sedgwick to star in new ABC series for fall 2020. I'm a big fan of hers. She was on The Closer and a terrific show. Tell us about this and your connection.
That show was set to shoot a pilot in March, and it shut down because of the virus. But on the strength of Kyra as an actor and the strength of the creator of that show and the script, also the creator of New Adventures of Old Christine, Carrie Leiser, they went straight to series. And so they did a Zoom writers room and with a lot of young writers, and they felt they just needed a little bit more experience. And so I went and consulted on the show for pre-production. So I did it for 7 weeks, and it was great. And I can't wait to see that show on its feet.
What does it feel like to go from being the young gun to the old hand brought in to support a show? When you were doing Seinfeld, you were in your 20s.
I was a baby writer, yeah. Boy, it feels like I'm in a time machine. It went fast. So, yeah, I was always the baby forever, and then I wasn't, and now I'm the old guy.
And that's what happened to me too, Matt. I was the young journalism professor and always asked about the future. And then one day I was invited to be on a panel, The Future of Journalism, 2 Generations. And then I realized I was the old generation, and my student Vadim Lavrusik, who's had a terrific career, was the young generation. And I couldn't believe that happened instantly in my mind, going from one to the other. And if it sounds like that the same happened to you. Speaking of age, Linda Bernstein, our good friend and colleague, asks, what about advice for old writers? You said for young writers. What about for old novelists to be?
If she means old as in how chronological age, or that you've been writing for a while, it's the same advice. Every time I start a project, I feel in a way like I've never faced the blank page before. And the one thing I've learned, I got some good advice when I was very young, 21 years old, from someone named Joel Hodgson, who is the creator of Mystery Science 3000 and the star of that show. Some people may recognize him. He told me, always believe you'll have another idea. And so that is the most freeing thing I ever heard. And it makes you not hold on to things. You don't treat your ideas as precious. You can see how they can be improved. And if you believe you'll just always have another idea, that helps quite a bit. And the other thing is that I've just learned over the years, because the anxiety of how something will be perceived never goes away, how it sells, those things just don't change. It doesn't get better. Is that just find a way to do it so that the process of writing is enough reward to do it. And then anything that happens after that is gravy.
Don't they say that in sports? Those folks who celebrate their touchdowns too much, they say, presume you'll get another touchdown.
Yes.
That you've been there before, you'll be there again, is the advice. I just want to do a couple of quick things in the book review.
Sure.
Twilight of Democracy, The Seductive Lure of Authoritarianism by Anne Applebaum. Anne is an incredible writer. This is reviewed by Bill Keller, the former executive editor of the New York Times. And she is terrific. If people aren't following her, they should. I had on our on my newsletter, which comes out every Sunday, we pointed to an Ann Applebaum tweet, and I just want to show everyone our Sunday note, which is the newsletter. It should be in your email inboxes if you're a subscriber. If you're not, please subscribe. We publish every single Sunday. We give you thoughts on society, culture, and technology. And the photo you see right now on this is a photo from yesterday. We went up to we were out in Westchester, and we went to Rockefeller State Park, and this is us relaxing there. There's our dog. I really wanted to get our dog into this.
Yeah,
since you have yours.
cute.
Yeah, and we in this issue, I'm talking about the value of universal basic income as a question. Is this the time to stop sending out $600 to people when they really need it? And then we have a read something where we encourage people to read things. We have tech tips from our colleague Robert Anthony, and he's at New York Bob, and he talks about portable power in this issue. So there's a lot going on in here, including our look at the unusual sight of a congressional hearing in the age of Zoom, and also, of course, we are pushing Matt Goldman's appearance on the New York Times read along. So if you're not a subscriber to the Sri Sunday Note, we hope you will sign up. It's easy to get. It's at srinet.substack.com. There you see it right on the screen. srinet.substack.com. Please sign up. We'd love to have you be a reader and to send us feedback on what we do there. All right, one more book to point out here, which I think is important. This is a book by Thomas Frank. Thomas wrote a book that I recommend all the time. It's called What is the Matter with Kansas? It was written to explain how people in Kansas can vote against their interests. So there's a new Thomas Frank book in the book review. And you're looking here at young monks gathered in a monastery and this is the story about Tibet and how one town in Tibet became the center of where self-immolation happens by Buddhist monks. That's the cover of the book review this week. And let's just very quickly.
One other book. I saw one other book mentioned in there. It's Kurt Anderson's new book. I can't remember what it's called, but he wrote Fantasyland. He's a wonderful writer who writes with humor and a very conversational voice. His new book is about the turn toward authoritarianism. I think that's what it's about in America in recent history.
And Kurt was the founder of Spy Magazine, has a great radio show, and he gave us Trump's little fingers. If you remember, he called him a little-fingered vulgarian in an issue of Spy Magazine, and that has survived all these years, including becoming an item of discussion at the debates, the Republican debates in 2016. So things that were just a joke, I really don't think his hand sizes matters or is different for a man of his size, but obviously that became something, and even Trump is obsessed about it. And that started with Kurt Anderson. If I remember my pop culture politics.
he was one of the founders of Spy.
All right, let's look very quickly at the nonfiction top 5 list. Tell us if you read any of these. Too Much and Never Enough by Marielle Trump. White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibrahim Kendi. And The Room Where It Happened by John Bolton. And Untamed by Glennon Doyle. The activist and public speaker describes her journey of listening to her inner voice. And the top fiction books, The Order by Daniel Silva. Peace Talks by Jim Butcher. The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett, 28 Summers by Ellen Hilderbrand, and Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. That's been on the list for 97 weeks.
I've read that one.
Yeah. Well, we're holding good thoughts for you, Matt. Your book comes out on Tuesday. It's called Dead West and stars Nils Shapiro, your unusually named but not so unusual detective, would be fair to say. Attempts to create a robotic novelist. Okay, let's see if, sorry, we had a screen up. I didn't notice the screen up. There you go. The book comes out Tuesday, Dead West by Matt Goldman. And it says A Writer to Watch by Harlan Coben. Harlan was a guest on this show, and any recommendation he makes goes a long way on this show and elsewhere. And the Times has attempts to create a robotic novelist. Robot, writing desk, manuscript, library of great literature. Too many robots, unnecessary rocket backpack, writer's block, circuit overload, too much coffee, random text or experimental poetry, escaped robot, endless manuscript, no talent, distracted by Twitter, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy, and then a masterpiece. Some of this sounds too close to home, doesn't it?
It's not a smooth process.
Congrats, Matt. Looking forward to reading on
Thank
Tuesday,
you.
says Patty. Hey, who says that only Terry Gross sells books? We sell books too here on the Read Along. We move
That's
books
great.
as well. We only have a few minutes left before we want to talk about Seinfeld. So let's go to the arts and leisure section, which, of course, you know a lot about from your TV work. And unusual and important suggestion in an essay by Wesley Morris, The Reconciliation Must Be Televised. And he's talking about having something like a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that happened in South Africa. And I've not read this entire piece yet, but Neil helped me understand that a little bit. What are your thoughts on that as an idea?
Well, never underestimate the power of television, for good or for bad. It's an incredibly powerful medium. It reaches into almost every single home in the country, and it's highly influential. I remember I started as a stand-up comedian, and I opened for Dana Carvey. After he had just finished his first season of Saturday Night Live, and it was at the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis, which is a somewhat well-known theater. And he came off stage. He'd been doing the same act for 10 years, but after being on TV, it was a completely different response. And it's just an insanely powerful medium. It's also why we have the president we have. That his image was built in a TV show. As a smart business person, as a powerful leader. So anything that can get on TV that has a good cause can be really effective.
And here is a picture of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa and the great Desmond Tutu in 1996 in East London, South Africa. Have you been to South Africa, by the way?
No, I would love to go. My friend who commented earlier, Adel, he's from South Africa. Yeah, I would absolutely like to go when this virus is conquered.
When do you think you would get on a plane again to travel internationally?
When there's a vaccine.
And that's the bottom line for you.
Yeah.
I hear you. Okay, so this is my former student and dear friend Basharat Peer writing, My friend, my brother was not in this world anymore. Everyone, please read this. Obviously, they're telegraphing how important this story is, to have it on the front of the Sunday Review. Something from India, while all this crazy stuff is happening in America, tells you something, and why we have editors. How to go to college during a pandemic. And your kids are past college age, is that right?
My stepkid, I have a stepdaughter who's going into her sophomore year in college.
Is she going
at the
to
university?
Go,
yeah, it's at the University of Minnesota. She is going to live in a house with some friends, so socially they'll have that. They're going to isolate together. And it's to be determined still how many of the classes, or if any, will be in person. She's a STEM kid, so some of the labs may be in person, but she's fortunate that she'll be able to be with her friends.
I'm glad to hear she has a plan. That's the main thing, right? This is what feels about this country, is that we don't have a plan. And here you have your stepdaughter in her 20s has a plan, and the country doesn't have a plan. I also want to say go Gophers, and good luck to her and the University of Minnesota. Speaking of animals, here's my former student, Sarah Maslin-Neer, To Break a Horse and a Woman. This is her essay but she's also the author of the forthcoming Horse Crazy, the story of a woman and a world in love with an animal, from which this essay is adapted. So we're going to have her on one of our shows soon. Sarah is a terrific Metro reporter. Racism That Lingers in Medical Schools by Damon Tweedy. We're going so fast, we're missing a lot of things in here, but people can find this all in the Times. John Lewis was the anti-Trump. One man embodied democracy, the other doesn't seem to know what it is. And voting by mail could save lives, but we have a president who's going out there and telling people that it's dangerous and that it's going to be the most rigged election in history. It's going to be the most rigged because he has made it the most rigged in history, is what I heard a TV pundit say today.
Yeah.
And very, very, very sad. Look at this picture in the New York Times, Samuel Coram, the way it's framed. Look at the light bulb above him.
Ah, boy.
There's going to be a lot of reaction to this if there hasn't been already. And by the way, the Trump family votes routinely by mail and has never been accused of cheating by that. The Zen of Tiny Clay Food, Rebecca Ackerman. The pleasures of trying to just get one smaller piece of the world just right is here. All right, before we talk about Seinfeld, we have one more thing we want to do, which is to read the New York Times Magazine, a little bit of it. And we're going to start by looking at this cover selection and design. And Neil has a way to show us what they were thinking about with the magazine design.
From the New York Times Magazine,
this is behind the cover.
Our cover story this week by Linda Villarosa is about environmental justice, and in particular, the fact that Black Americans are 75% more likely than other Americans to live in so-called fence line communities. These are areas situated near facilities that emit hazardous waste. The story centers on the community of Grays Ferry in Philadelphia.
We decided to work with Hannah Price, a documentary photographer based in Philadelphia.
From the New York Times Magazine,
this is behind the cover.
Our cover story this week by Linda Villarosa is about environmental injustice, and in particular...
Sorry, we're having some issues with that. You get the idea of what they were trying to do, and this is the final cover they selected. And there's a question in here. For the rest of your life, if you can listen to music from only one decade, which do you pick?
Oh, are you asking me?
Yes.
Oh, man. I don't know. I have such an eclectic taste in music. You could have narrowed it to century. Boy, I'm going to say the 70s because I'd get a little John Lennon. I'd get the very start of some hip hop, the very start of bands like REM. I don't know. That's a wild guess.
I think the 70s is a good choice. And in fact, that was 55% of the audience chose that. I mean, there's no right or wrong answer. 12%.
Some great album covers.
Yeah, exactly. And I would go with the 70s as well, but that also reflects our age. I turned 50 this year, so
I'm 57. So
yeah, well, you have better hair than I do at 57. So that's, yeah. Let's keep going with the magazine. Let's see what else is in here. One of the things we do is we try to read the poem out loud, and we do this without any preparation. So I'm going to butcher this, but it's a short poem, so I'm going to read it. Beatific by Tracy K. Smith. I watch him bob across the intersection, squat legs bowed in black sweatpants. I watch him smile at nobody at our traffic stop to accommodate his slow going. His arms churn the air. His comic jog carries him nowhere. But it is as if he hears a voice in our idling engines calling him lithe, swift, prince of creation. Every last leaf shivers in the sun while we sit bothered, late, captive to this thing commanding. Wait for this man, wait for him. Interesting poem. I think it gives us a sense of all of us have to pay attention to the world around us. I think before the pandemic, we just kept doing whatever we wanted and not paying attention to the world. And I think we're paying more attention. Will we keep paying attention is another question altogether. And here are Ben and Jerry their full names. Not everybody is used to seeing their full names. There's Ben Cohen and Jerry Greenfield, and two very progressive folks doing great ice cream and great social change work. It's like the one day I showed people a photograph of Dolce and Gabbana, and they look like these guys, by the way. Dolce and Gabbana have the same fashion taste in the photos I showed people, and they had no idea that they were two middle-aged men named Dolce and Gabbana. And here they were when they were younger. What's your favorite ice cream?
Oh, I really do love Ben and Jerry's. I like Cherry Garcia and Chunky Monkey. Those are two of my favorites.
Yes. Okay, we have a quick question for you from the ethicist. Can my boss force me to promise that I don't have COVID-19 symptoms? What's your answer if somebody asks you that?
You can promise that you don't have symptoms, but you can't promise that you have COVID-19.
Correct.
So a lot of people are asymptomatic.
That is absolutely true. And there's so much in the magazine, but we're already at 10:06, and I want to use the last few minutes to get some questions of you. We promised people the early days of Seinfeld. So talk about how that all came together, what your connection is, and then we'll go from there.
My connection is I started as a stand-up comedian, and I met Jerry before the show when he was still working in small clubs. I opened for him 10 shows in 1 week. He was big in the stand-up world, but he wasn't a household name. And then I moved to Los Angeles to be a writer. They made a pilot of Seinfeld without Elaine, without that character. NBC passed. Then they had a change of heart and said, we'll give you 4 episodes if you add a woman character, which Larry and Jerry didn't want to do initially. And then they said, well, we'll add a woman character, but we're just going to write her like a guy. And that is the creation of Elaine. So I knew Jerry, and I had written a play with another comedian named Pat Hazel, and Jerry really liked that play. And so when the show came up, he asked us to both come work on the show. And it was, in the very beginning, it was just Larry and Jerry and me and Pat. And Pat and I were in our 20s. And so I feel like I was just lucky to be there. But I did get a front row seat to the creation and development of what I think is one of the greatest TV shows of all time. I take no credit for it. That's all Larry and Jerry. But I learned the most important lesson there is to learn for any creative person in any medium, which is your vision and your voice is the most important thing. It's what will set you apart from everybody else, and it will also give you the most universal appeal. There was a meeting early on where we were about to do the first 4 episodes. There was a meeting at NBC. Castle Rock was the studio, and Larry David was not allowed to attend because NBC thought he was too volatile and they were afraid of him. And so they sent me just to have another body in the room. And NBC quite specifically spoke about what they envisioned for the show, and Jerry listened patiently. And at the end of that, he said, we're not going to do that. And NBC said, well, we're the network and this is our note. We think you should take it seriously. And Jerry quite calmly said, I hear what you want us to do. That's not our vision. If you don't like what we do, cancel the show. I'm very happy to be a stand-up comedian for the rest of my life. And I'm not sure exactly why NBC didn't cancel the show. They did not like it for the first 3 years it was on. There's rumors as to why that didn't happen. There was an acting president, and Brandon Tartikoff was the actual president, but he was quite sick and in the hospital. And I heard that his wife really liked it, and that's why it didn't get canceled, but I don't know if that's true. But it really is a testament to voice and vision, and also to character. If you remember that show in the very beginning, shows like The Parking Garage or The Chinese Restaurant, yes, or The Stakeout, or The Robbery, which is the one I wrote, those characters were all in the same situation. So you got to know them in relation to each other and through one story. And then when you got to know those characters and like them, you could go off in different directions in them, and they could have separate stories. And, you know, it's a real testament to character when one can lie to a woman and say he's a marine biologist, and another character can hit a golf ball into the ocean that just happens to go into a whale spout, and the whale washes up on shore, and the crowd says, "Is anybody here a marine biologist?" And George is there. And you don't go, "That's the dumbest idea I've ever heard of." You're with it because you're with those characters. And so it's a real lesson in how to build a show. And most TV executives don't have the patience anymore to let a show build like that and let the audience get to know and love those characters.
Dr. Chandrasekhar, who hosts at She's on Call, which is coming up at 11 a.m. Eastern in about 45 minutes. She says, you guys made a show about nothing into a show about everything. That was the magic.
Yeah, I never believed that it was a show about nothing. I think it's a show about selfishness. Those four characters are the most selfish human beings on the face of the planet. What makes it universal is we all have those impulses, and what makes it so entertaining is they act on the impulses most of us have the good sense not to act on.
Danielle says Matt Goldman comes with a really nice feeling about him. And Patty says, you said Cherry Garcia and Chunky Monkey so seriously. LOL.
Yeah, I'm not messing around. Yeah.
You take things very seriously. We've got a gentleman watching from South Korea. He's a college student and says he loves watching the New York Times read along because of that. And also says that that's a really moving story. Our voices to the media is certainly crucial in these times. So great to have you. Because his name is in Korean, of course, I can't read it. Right. Nice to have you here. Typically inspired by the first page of the New York Times on July 31st, it shows a graph of the seriousness of America's economic development. That was earlier this week. That is kind of the way the American economy had tanked by 32% or something.
Yes.
GDP growth. That was what's happening. Just to stick to Seinfeld for a couple more minutes, why did Jerry pick two people to bring them along on this ride with him and David and Larry David, when he would have had much closer friends who are stand-up comics and others who he owed favors to and everything else? Why take these? At least you were young. I forget if your friend was also young.
Yeah. My friend Pat, we're the same age. Jerry, listen, picking Larry David was an outrageous thing to do. Larry was a comic. He had some writing experience on the show Fridays and Saturday Night Live. But Jerry, to his great credit, for all the writers who worked on that show, chose people with strong, unique voices. To pick Larry was a crazy move. All the people that could have run that show with him, but he knew Larry had a great voice and a vision, and so I think Jerry just happened to like what Pat and I brought to the show. Pat was also a stand-up, and he really did a lot of work with those stand-up interstitials that bookended the show and were between scenes. Seinfeld had those for the first 3 or 4 or 5 years.
They were great.
Yeah. So they developed Jerry had some material, but it got chewed up, obviously, pretty quickly in series TV. So they wrote additional stuff. That show was originally going to be a special about where a comedian gets their material from. And here comes Maisie. This is the other poodle. Here she is.
Wow.
She's a little bigger. And so that's how that show developed. And by the way, because it developed that way, it came up through late night and specials. And the late night and specials people had no idea how to do a half-hour comedy. Larry and Jerry had no idea how to do a half-hour comedy. They would send me, there was a time we divided up when they would go to New York to write, and they would send me scripts and to ask what I thought. And I would say, I think it's 20 pages too short. And they didn't know, but that's what made that show great. And anything I've ever worked on that has turned out to be successful and a joy to make felt like a bunch of kids in their garage who didn't know what they were doing, no matter if I was in my 50s or in my 20s. Yeah.
And that sounds like how tech innovation is done, right? Like that famous garage scene where you're just in there. Apollo says, "Love your poodles. I want an Airedale."
Oh,
and
great dogs.
And June Lee. And by the way, Apollo's also in Vegas, so up early. His episode, he came on that Vegas episode I mentioned on my daily program. He talked about what's it like to be an African American living in India. When he went to India and lived there and interacting with the police, it was quite the adventure. So go back and watch that, folks, if you get a chance. You can find all our archives, including our Harlan Coben episode of the Read Along, on my YouTube account, youtube.com/Sreenet, SREENET. And we want to give a shout out to June Lee, who is watching from Seoul, Korea. And June watched my episode where I interviewed Christian Amanpour. And again, you can find those archives in youtube.com/Sreenet. Let's get some more Seinfeld trivia in here and experiences. Larry David to me was George was Larry Kramer, George was Larry David. I'm getting it all confused.
Right.
And then I said that he grows up and goes to the suburbs, and that's what Curb Your Enthusiasm is. And you said he doesn't quite grow up, and Larry is Larry David.
Yeah, it's amazing. He is that guy, and yet somehow steps out to write about it, which it just I can't figure out how he does that. But things would happen every day that, to the best of my knowledge, have not been turned into episodes on Seinfeld or Curb. Like Larry, in the beginning, he was obsessed with finding the perfect lunch. It was this quest of his. Every day we would go out for lunch, and we had to keep going to different restaurants. He was just obsessed in his quest to find a lunch that he loved. And he finally found this one salad at a restaurant that he said, "This is it. This is the perfect lunch. The perfect lunch. I'm going to eat this every day from now on. This is the perfect lunch." And we had to go to that restaurant every day. And he was single. He had not met his wife yet. And the hostess, like a lot of Los Angeles hostesses, was quite attractive. And because they're actors and this is their day job. And Larry would flirt with her more and more every day. And so he finally got up the nerve and asked her out, and she said no, and we could never go back and get the perfect lunch. Like, he was denied that for the rest of his life. So those are the kind of things that happen to him every day.
I think characters find unusual things that happen to them, right? And they pay attention. I'm looking at some of the episodes that you wrote: The Stranded, The Baby Shower, which is great, The Phone Message, The Ex-Girlfriend, The Robbery.
Oh yeah, I was a producer. I was a story editor on those. Yeah, not a writer on all of those, but story editor.
You know, we laymen don't know the difference between all of them. You're Mr. Seinfeld to us from the show, and we are so grateful that you spent this time with us. Janet, who's in Minneapolis, I believe, or somewhere in Minnesota, says, "I have a newspaper publisher tell me it was okay to sleep under my desk." I'm sure there was some influence from George.
Yes.
And there's that great episode where he was.
Yes.
How did you part ways with Jerry and company? Why did you part? How did it go?
You know, I went to them. Larry and Jerry did almost everything on that show, and as they should have. So as a young writer, I was started to feel like I wanted to learn more about making a TV show, because in television, the writers are the producers. And that's why you see a million producer credits up there. Most, not all, but most of them are writers. And so I asked to leave toward the end of the second season. And I went to work on a different show with a executive producer named Diane English, who created Murphy Brown.
Yes.
And another show called Love and War that I worked on. And her process there was more room for me to go to casting and editing and learn those aspects of TV production. So that's why I left. And I'm always asked if I regret it, and I don't regret it. You know, in the very beginning on Seinfeld, it was hard for other writers and there weren't many of us. Larry Charles, who went on to have a wonderful career and is a great guy and a great writer. All of us, we didn't have a writer's room on that show, at least when I was there, which is not normal for comedy. Larry and Jerry were in their office, and I was in my office, and Pat was in an office, and Larry Charles was, and they were not great communicators of what they wanted their vision to be. If you read a Seinfeld script and you don't know that show and you haven't seen it on its feet, it doesn't read like a hilarious show but Larry and Jerry knew it was, because everything's in the nuance and in the language. And so it was a hard show to understand what they wanted in the beginning until it really got rolling and you could see, oh, that's what they're doing. And so that's why I left. And I went on to have a very nice career, so I have no complaints about that.
And also, you got as much as you could out of that. You had the experience. You'll always have that on your resume. You had an experience at the very beginning of Seinfeld. You got to go to that meeting where you were the extra body. And those are things that happen in our business now. You know, we pitch virtual events. We produce virtual events.
Yes.
Just who's in the room? I don't always want to go alone to a Zoom pitch meeting, having my colleagues there, not just because they're extra bodies, but because they supplement and complement what you're doing. All of this matters, and I can't imagine the pressure of being at the Seinfeld pitch meeting, which was covered later in Seinfeld itself. One of the observed things that Seinfeld was able to do.
Bob Balaban did a great job.
Exactly. Before you go, I just want to tell everyone that please get his book on coming out on Tuesday. You can pre-order it now. We've had several people say they've already done that. It's called Dead West, a novel by Matt Goldman, New York Times bestselling author. And look at Harlan Coben's wonderful, wonderful blurb. Irreverent and insightful private detective Nil Shapiro is sure to become a fan favorite, a writer to watch. And Matt Goldman has written the perfect PI novel. Smart, spare, sarcastic, and completely heartbreaking, says Hank Felipe Ryan. Please follow him, Goldman_Matthew, and mattgoldman.com. What I take away from your Seinfeld stories includes the idea that Jerry was willing to walk away from everything.
Absolutely.
Because he follow his artistic vision. How many of us would have the ability to do that? How many of us would be willing to do that? It's a question for all of us to think about at this moment. And I'm so grateful to you for being here with us, for giving us your time, for sharing your dogs and your stories. I wish you the very best as you launch Dead West, and
thank you, Shri.
You'll come on one of our other shows down the road. And
I would love to, and thank you so much for having me. It's really a pleasure.
Thank you, and please recommend us to your author friends as
I will.
Who give good podcasts. And we'll bring Neil back to come say hello and tell us about next week's show, and we'll say goodbye to Matt as well. So thank you, Matt. Bye-bye.
Hey, Shri, how you doing? We have a great guest plan for next week. It's Elaine Siolino. She is the former Paris bureau chief for the New York Times and a contributing writer. She's based in France since 2002, and she has a book that she wrote last, I think it was November, it came out, about the Seine. So we're looking forward to hosting her. We also want to make sure that people tune in for She's on Call this week. Shri, we have a great show planned for that as well. We have Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Kurian. We'll be talking to guests.
Yeah, they're talking to Dr. Benjamin Chang and Dr. Claudette Lejam.
Correct.
Ben Chang did one of the first hand surgery transplants in the world, and he's going to be our guest. And Dr. Claudette is an orthopedist, and Dr. Sujana and Dr. Marina, two awesome surgeons. I'm honored to play the Neil Parekh role as executive producer on that show. She's on Call starting in about 35 minutes. I got to go get ready for that. So I'm going to say goodbye, Neil, as you take over and do all our goodbye. Our credits are so important. We know that from Seinfeld and the work with Matt. I just want to thank Matt again, thank our producers again, and thank everyone for watching. We do this every Sunday like crazy people. Read the New York Times out loud. It's going to be 5 years in October. We want your suggestions of who you'd like to see in what we call our epic episodes. Today was a pretty epic episode, and that's going to be all of October as we run up to the elections. Meanwhile, I do the daily COVID show where we talk about different aspects of the COVID crisis. Today's episode 144. We'll have a guest to talk about positivity in the middle of all this rotten stuff that is going on in the world. But please tune in every day. We're on the air for 144 straight days, and our 150th episode is coming up soon.
Before you leave, Shri, let's go ahead and thank our sponsors. You can thank Muckrack, and then I'll take the show from there so you can get ready for She's on Call.
Matt was so great that we kept going, and our sponsors include Muckrack Academy, Fundamentals of Social Media, free certification now available, mrac.co/social. I learned a lot putting this course together. You will too. Free certification. 4,000 people have taken this course, and so should you. Free certificate available right now.
Thank you, Shri. And we'd also like to thank Magic Bus USA. Magic Bus is a great organization and another one of our sponsors. They imagine a world where children break out of poverty and lead fulfilling, rewarding lives, contributing to their community and to the world around them. As you can see, 7 out of 10 adolescents do not have a higher secondary qualification. 6 out of 10 youth do not have the soft skills necessary for employment. And 3 out of 10 girls are married before they reach the age of 18. Those, of course, are stats from India. In addition to Muckrack and Magic Bus USA, we have Strategy Focus Group as a sponsor. Strategy Focus Group is a global team of human capital strategists committed to helping organizations solve people issues within your organization. They do that by working alongside you to solve your toughest problems and helping you capture your greatest opportunities. Thank you again to Muckrack, particularly Greg Gallant and Mike Schneider, Magic Bus USA, our friend Pradnya Haldapur, and Strategy Focus Group, our good friend Ron Thomas. Thank you for your support of the New York Times Read Along. If you're interested in being a sponsor, please contact Shri. His email is shri@shri.net, and myself, Neil Parekh. My email is neil@neilparekh.org. I would also like to take a moment, and we would have done this earlier, but I want to acknowledge a great newsletter put out by Carla Baranakis called Local Connection. Subscribe for weekly story ideas and pro tips for local reporters. The Local Connection is put out by the Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University, and each week it offers story ideas and pro tips for journalists. The best thing is that it's free. So please go to bit.ly/local news tips to subscribe to the Local Connection. And speaking of Carla and the rest of our team, we would not be able to do this show without our great production team. Shri, of course, is our host. I'm our executive producer and guest host. And we have Paula Kiger at Big Green Pen, Steve Taylor at Steve DeReeve, Julia Weeks at Julia L. Weeks, and Carla Baranakis at CABARA at Kabara. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. It has been a pleasure, and we look forward to seeing you next week on the New York Times Read Along. And as Shri mentioned, he has his daily COVID call this is just the numbers from the first 75 shows, and we're already at 144, but gives you a sense of the scope. He's been doing the show every day, and I am pleased. Shri had to run before we could talk about it, but I want to let you know that I will be the guest on tonight's Shri COVID-19 call, the Positivity Edition. So please join us. We've got a lot of great things to talk about. And again, thank you for joining us for the New York Times Read Along. We'll see you tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern Time and next week with Elaine Siolino. Thank you and have a great week.